My name is Larry Rubin, and I was an organizer for SNCC from 1961 to 65. First in Georgia and then in Mississippi. Many white people said, they went south because they saw a disconnect between what they were taught in school, and in America everybody is free and equal, and what they saw on TV. African Americans get beaten up to try to exercise the rights that they were born with. And they went south because they were shocked. Me? No. I was not. I knew capitalism sucked. For generations, the Jewishness of my family was rooted in the secular humanist tradition. My grandparents fought against the oppression of the Jews in Eastern Europe. But they joined with other groups because they knew deep down and for sure that the Jewish people would not be free from discrimination and oppression unless all people were. My family knew deep down and for sure that what a Jew does is fight for justice. I did not go south to help black people. I went south, and a lot of other white people did too, because we were sure that if African Americans could vote, they would vote out of office these white, racist Southerners who were running the Congress and the Senate in the 60s. The reason they kind of liked it over and over again, was because many of their constituents, in some cases the majority of their constituencies, couldn't vote. And we figured if African Americans got the vote, they would vote these bozos out of office. And that would help everybody. Because these guys were also anti-Semitic. We knew the only way to wipe out discrimination against Jews in America was to wipe out discrimination against all people in America. Most Southern Jews were. I was kicked out of a synagogue in Albany, Georgia. Went in the services during the Yom Shabbat, told me to leave. The shamus there said, if it wasn't for the fact that that black people were discriminated against, if it wasn't for the fact that black people were discriminated against, we would be, the Jews would be. So let it be the blacks. It was absolutely dead wrong. When the segregation laws ended, everybody benefited. I should have known when I was talking. His name was Stonewall Cohn. The actual work we did in this stuff, I hear a lot about the beatings and the arrests. We've all been there. But the actual work that we did, the core of it, was walk down these red clay dusty roads, knock on the houses of black people, and talk. Just talk. Not doing house of crops, the weather, like that. If we built some trust, maybe we would talk about registering to vote. That's all we did. And that's what the racists wanted to stop. That's it. It was that simple. I was arrested once in Belzoni, Mississippi for suspicion of stealing a shirt that I was wearing because I didn't have a sales slip. He arrested us for those kind of things all the time. They dragged me out of my cell. They put me in a room by myself. The deputies and the sheriffs started to hit me, surround me, and said, we haven't hung us a heave in a long time. It was amazing how many black people actually did register to vote. Because if you tried to register to vote, your name was in the paper. You would definitely be fired if you worked for a white person. You put off your land as a tenant farmer. You could be beaten. Between 1961 and 66, 8 people were killed in Mississippi alone just for voter registration. As white people, though, we had another fundamental job. To show both the white and black communities that blacks and whites could work together and and whites were not in charge. Often, when I was talking, as I was saying, we went from house to house, often I would just stand there, say nothing. And I would let the black person, who was an organizer also, do the talk. This was important work. Today, we have new challenges, much tougher than it was in the 60s, because the system has learned how to absorb certain changes. 50 years ago, we had clearly discriminatory voting rights laws. Clearly discriminatory. Today, we have more subtle voter suppression laws. Then, we had clear segregation. Now, we have the new Jim Crow. Segregation by being put in prison. Then, people were killed, but at least there was an agreement that killing was illegal. Kill somebody, try to hide it. Today, we have legal lynching. These stand your ground laws and the rules that the police operate under, legal lynching. 50 years ago, the idea that it takes collective action to change things was in the air. Assumed. Nobody talked about it. Today, the media and the schools teach people it takes heroes to make changes. That's not true. And it turns a lot of people off from joining a movement, although I have to say that's changing. There is an explosion of collective action across the country. And today, a lot of people, especially young people, mistake the fact that we can send out quadrillion gigabytes of information, Facebook and all of this. They confuse that with organizing. It's not the putting out of the information, it's what you do with it at the other end. And that takes organizing and building trust, and it takes time. 50 years ago, there wasn't this idea among Jews that some kind of way their Jewishness had to do with Israel. It just wasn't there. Today, the Jewish community, by and large, with the exception of everyone in this room, have been bullied by the leaders of the Jewish community into conflating being Jewish with having a special relationship with Israel. And what's worse, that special relationship should be to support Israel, period. The Jewish leaders and the Jewish community want there to be a Jewish community and nobody should argue. It does not work. It has never worked. I returned from Israel-Palestine for the first time about 3 weeks ago. I saw a country where no rights are guaranteed by Constitution. When we were fighting in the South, these were constitutional rights. In Israel, there is no Constitution. So there is no constitutional rights for anybody. I saw a country where discrimination is rampant. Military production is the main product. The 1% who run Israel are making billions. But the average person just within the green line finds it hard to get along even on 2 jobs. Just like here. There are massive demonstrations and strikes regularly within the community. Those running the country, and this is the key thing, those running Israel today have destroyed the social network that existed when Israel was founded. Israel was founded as a social democracy. No longer. Everything's been privatized. And they're making billions off this. These are the same individuals that are privatizing the U.S. economy. This Sheldon Adelson character from Las Vegas, he's the main supporter of Likud. When I was in Israel, they gave Mike Huckabee, this right-wing preacher who the president's nuts, Israel gave him an award. When I was in Mississippi, it was clear that those running the system were keeping blacks and whites separate to prevent them from getting together and fighting for their common interests. It's the same in Israel. To prevent major opposition within the Green Line, the government sends lower economic class Jews to the settlements. You can get a cheap house there, get tax breaks, all sorts of benefits. All you have to do is keep the Palestinians at bay. It's like the United States did. If that's God, you're wrong.
That's my mother.
In the United States in the 1880s, immigrants would come to New York, they would have work under lousy conditions, but instead of allowing them to form unions and fight, the United States said, okay, go west. We'll give you free land. This is a homestead. All you got to do is kill Indians for us. It's the same thing in Israel today. On the West Bank, we saw grinding poverty. Shepherds were prevented from grazing sheep and goats on lands they've occupied for thousands of years. We saw the wall around Bethlehem, 25, 26 feet high, with these circles of barbed wire on top and gun turrets. When you stand under it, you feel like you're in a concentration camp. The league that I was with in Israel, in Palestine, was the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. We felt that the best way we could express our Jewishness was to replant trees that the IDF had torn up on a farm owned by a Palestinian. I did this last night. I think. Yes, Daoud Nasser. Yes. I think Daoud, after he saw the work that we did the first day, was very happy that there was a storm that prevented us from doing more. I met with trade unionists who were organizing Jewish and Palestinian workers to wrest control of the government away from the 1% to actually serve the people. And they feel that this will make the solution to the conflict possible. The government just starts serving the people. In Hebron, an IDF platoon armed with submachine guns tried to stop us from walking down Shahada Street. I thought I was in Mississippi again. People from my Jewish tradition supported the establishment of Israel because we believe if we are not for ourselves, we will for them. But embedded in the heart and soul of the Jewish tradition is, if we are not for others, what are we? I believe this. I believe if we are not for others, we are not people that I recognize as Jewish. And I believe this, that the Jewish people will not be safe until all peoples